Kate Milifalcho, welcome to Irish Granny Helen. Welcome back, finally. Debbra Lupien, voice of the AKASHIC Records. I don't know, I'm going to develop a syndrome or something. So many people have been asking me, when are you going to do it with Debbra again? Where's Debbra? Or the nicer way, I really love those sessions you do with Debbra. I'm so glad you're back.
Yeah, well, I had a great time while I was away, but I'm happy to be back and in the saddle with you. So
renewed, rejuvenated, yeah, ready to dip your toe into psychopathy again. Yeah, good. Yeah. All prepared. So do you want to talk about your background?
Yeah.
Behind you, not your life. Behind you.
Oh, I got that. Yeah. So this background is acknowledging Sharon Tate, because we're going to talk about Manson and Sharon Tate. We wanted to focus on the lighter side, the illumination, the luminous side.
Yeah.
You know, we're hoping maybe there's been some changes since Manson crossed over, and maybe he's on a better path now. So this is a hopeful image.
How much do you know about Sharon Tate?
I know she was pregnant. Was it Roman Polanski? And she was an up and coming star.
Do you know anything about their wedding?
No.
That's very interesting, because she wore daisies in her hair when she got married.
Oh, no, I didn't. I didn't ask for daisies. I just said, you know, this is what I'm looking for.
Okay. Well, let me show you the picture. She and Roman Polanski got married in London. Oh, here we go. I guess I Googled it before. Here's a picture. Oh, come on now. There we go. Do you see?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, beautiful.
And it was a mini dress. It was shocking. My mother was horrified. Okay, let's get to work here. So I have kind of an in-depth video I did on his background and his life, because, you know, the ongoing argument about psychopathy is nature versus nurture. How much of it are you genetically born with? How much of it depends on how you're treated, especially as a child, your upbringing. And I think a third legitimate consideration would be how much of it is karmic. And there's an argument to be made for that. You know, Denise does the astrological charts.
Right.
And so I don't speak astrology, so I'll do my best to summarize what she's told me. What little I really understand of it is that you have these nodes on your astrological chart, and there's some sort of weird nodal situation that is unusual, and it seems to appear on all of these criminal psychopaths, because not all psychopaths are criminal. In fact, a small number of them are. People equate them with murderers, and you know, and that can be true, but it's not most of them. Usually, if they're criminal, it's like white collar type crime. You know, they're the kind of people who like to lie and manipulate and be fraudulent and sort of toy with people. They enjoy making you squirm, you know. But there is the small percentage that are really off the deep end. And Charles Manson, man, he was really weird. So shall we get to work?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so we have questions for Charlie Manson. Born in 1934. Okay. So can I start?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay. So his childhood was really difficult. His mother was 16. His father was a guy in his 20s whose first name, not his rank, his name was Colonel. And his mother, who was only 16, thought he was a colonel. And when he found out she was pregnant, he leaned into it and he told her, well, you know, the military is calling me out of town. He was gone, which isn't really funny, but it kind of is, you know. So she seemed to be somewhat disturbed. And I think that would be my first question to him. If he has the insight now. How would he describe his mother at 16 when she got pregnant?
Okay, so Mr. Manson, how would you describe your mother? She was addle-brained. Very, just, no making it pretty, just matter of fact. She was addle-brained. That's how he saw her.
So would he elaborate on that? Was she mentally ill? Did she have a personality disorder? Or was she just not terribly smart? What does he mean by that?
Yeah, okay. So can you tell us what you mean by that? Are you saying that she just wasn't a smart person? No, she was smart in her own way. There was just something clearly wrong with her. So are you saying, like, did she have a mental illness? No, it was more like a mental defect.
Personality disorder, yeah. So here's something to think about. She and her brother, his uncle, had a little criminal enterprise that they engaged in. They'd go to a bar, and the uncle, her brother, would stay outside. She'd go inside and entice some guy. Let's go out to the parking lot, wink, wink, and they'd go out to the parking lot, and the brother would whack him on the head, and they'd rob him. And they finally got caught, and she spent 5 years in prison for it. At which point she was pregnant when she was 16, and this is after he was born. So can he describe what happened to him after his mother went to prison?
So can you tell us what happened when your mother went to prison? What happened to you? Was there the family that stepped up? No. He's saying there was no family to step up. Not any that cared anyway. So where did you go? Okay. He's saying he was in the foster system.
He actually had kind of distant relatives, aunts and uncles. At least that's what they called them, was aunts and uncles. But he was moved around. True. He was moved around from strangers to friends to aunts and uncles, quote unquote, all over the place. It was a really unstable environment. I read someplace, and I'm curious, is this true? And if this is true, what were the long-term effects? He had an uncle, and I don't know if it's a blood relative, but he had an uncle who took pleasure in torturing him, emotionally, and forced him to go to school wearing a dress. Is that true?
Oh, wow. So did you have an uncle who tortured you and made you go to school in a dress? Is that a true story? Yeah, sorry to say it is true.
So is this the uncle that belonged to the really extreme religion?
Did this uncle belong to an extreme religion? No, he was extreme something. He didn't really understand about the religion. Just knew his uncle was an oddball. But then it's feeling like there's a lot of that in his family.
Oh, it was terribly dysfunctional, terribly. Which, I don't know if he can shine any light on it. But there's just this ongoing debate how much of his behavior came out of the chaos of his childhood and the criminality of his family, and how much of it came out of something genetic, or does he have any insight? Was it karmic?
What I'm getting is he's hinting that his mother was a product of incest, and that was what he meant about the addle brain. There was a mental defect.
Yeah, that's not at all surprising. In fact, you would probably assume that kind of thing was going on, because it was a mess, the description. What was his uncle like, the one who was his mother's brother that she partnered in crime with?
So the uncle who committed crimes with your mother, what was he like? He was as addle-brained as she was. They were just trying to survive. They didn't really have the wherewithal to lead a normal life. So it's like they were feral, is what he's saying, and just surviving.
Which, remember I told you about the psychiatrist who did the study, and that's one of the things he said about him.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So can he look back now with a little perspective, and could he describe how he felt as a child then? Did he have a lot of anger? Was it just confusion? There was so much instability.
Yeah, so tell us about your childhood. What was that like? What were you thinking? Well, like mom and uncle, it was really more about survival because he just saw threats everywhere and there weren't many hands reaching out to help. So it was you got to get by, you got to take care of yourself. And that helped him develop this kind of a shell or a harsh side where he didn't give a flip about anybody else. It was all about taking care of him. And then once he shifted into that way of beingness, then it started twisting and it became about doing things to amuse himself.
So he was in and out of reform schools and boys' schools and detention centers, etc., from the time he was about 8. Can he talk about that?
Yeah, that's awful. So tell us about the reform schools and in and out of different facilities. What was that like for you? Well, it wasn't a whole lot of fun, I can tell you that. It was confusing because it's like you're a drowning person and all you're doing is just trying to keep your head above water. And you do some desperate things when you're in that situation.
Who in his life was did anybody in his life provide him with any kind of moral compass?
So would you say, is there anybody that you can think of in your childhood that provided you with a moral compass? No, the people he knew were all just trying to get by. It was a rough time.
No guidance inside the actual institutions, the reform schools and the detention places. They sounded predatory, I'll have to tell you.
Yeah, well, they said, they preach at you all this stuff that you're supposed to do. But if you're smart and you look around, you notice that they're not following the rules that they're preaching at you. So,
right, they're taking advantage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things he would do to be left alone, because the bigger, older boys preyed on the younger ones, and I won't go into detail, but I know you can figure out what I mean. One of the ways that he protected himself was to throw himself on the ground and pretend to have seizures and act insane. When did it cross the threshold? When did he really start to lose his grip?
So it's true that you would throw yourself to the ground and pretend to have seizures to ward off attacks. Yeah, pretty clever, wasn't it?
Actually was.
So can you tell us, when do you think, if you do, that there was a point where you crossed a line and shifted into more mania and stopped trying to be a normal human being? Well, that was about the time the hormones kicked in. So 13, 14, in that time frame.
So it consistently was committing crimes that got less petty, more serious. And he was getting older, so he was put in more serious institutions. He ended up in a state institution, and then he ended up in a federal institution. And about a week before he was going to get out, he attacked a younger boy. And I just wonder, was that an effort to stay inside because he didn't like the options outside?
So when you attacked the younger boy, when you were in the institution, was that deliberate so that you could stay there? Is that the truth of the matter? No, at that point, he would have rages where he just couldn't control himself. So there was something about that boy that just set him off. He wasn't even thinking about that place and getting out soon. In fact, he didn't think about a lot of things. He was like in this fugue state most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you read the details of his childhood, you would assume that there would be no other alternative. I mean, it's just really horrifying. There's no sense in us going into all the details here. You can watch the video I made, and even then I had to be very careful the words I use. So you can imagine. So he got released and he went to live with his aunt, and his aunt was the Nazarene. So I'm just curious, what was it like living with somebody from that extreme religion? Or once again, did he just ignore it?
So tell us about living with your aunt who was a Nazarene. What was that like? Well, he thought she was BS crazy, but it was really nice to have a bed and meals and clothing to stop worrying about just surviving every day. So he kind of ignored the crazy stuff and just leaned into the normalcy that was not normal for him.
Well, it's like going back to that comment about him being feral. It was survival. It was all about survival. So he met a girl who was 16. She was a waitress. She got pregnant. They went to California to live with his mother, which I think might have been a questionable choice. But he ended up, through a series of revoked probations and continued misbehavior, he ended up in Terminal Island for 3 years. And she had the baby. She lived with his mother. What was it like being back with his mother? Even for him, it was a brief amount of time. But what was that like, sort of reconnecting with his mother?
So tell us what it was like reconnecting with your mother when you moved in with her and your pregnant girlfriend. In some ways, it felt like a homecoming. It was familiar. And there was some comfort in that. But she was not any smarter or better off than she had been before. So it was a safe place to land for a while, but we had no intention of staying there long term.
So then once again, he's back in incarceration, and the young woman divorced him. They had gotten married. I don't know if I mentioned that. They had, because she was pregnant, and she divorced him. But while he was in there, he started to take lessons from pimps and other criminals. They kind of taught him the craft of being a prisoner. Of being a criminal. But one of the things that he specifically used was the Dale Carnegie course, how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was there the intention when he started to do that? Did he do it intentionally so that he could manipulate people?
So tell us about the Dale Carnegie course. Did you lean into that purposefully so that you could control people and manipulate them? Yeah, well, I figured if they were going to give you an instruction book, you were pretty smart to follow it.
Yeah, I'm just astounded that they actually allowed them to take those classes in prison. So there's just a constant criminal behavior, probation, breaking probation or parole, into incarceration, back out, and it's just a cyclical pattern. He got married again and immediately transported her and a few of her friends across state lines for the purposes of making money, and ended up getting caught on a Mann Act violation. Mann Act is you can't transport people. It's the same thing that they talked about charging Matt Gaetz with. And it's his dentist friends, I think, is serving time for that. I could be wrong. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure. So he ended up on McNeil Island in Washington State, which it said was really hardcore. And by the time he was like 26, he was extremely institutionalized. One of the things that he did was learn to play the guitar. And the other thing he did was learn to hypnotize people. Could he talk about that?
Oh, wow.
I
So,
know, I can't believe it.
so can you talk about learning to play the guitar and hypnotizing people? They make a pretty good combo, don't you think? Okay, so what were you thinking when you were doing that? I was thinking that this was a pretty good way to make your way through life. Win friends, influence enemies. Person could set themselves up pretty well with these systems.
So he met a guy in prison by the name of Phil Kaufman. And Phil Kaufman was actually from Hollywood. He was a music producer. And he got into prison for white collar crime. And so he was trying very hard, Phil Kaufman was, to make his stay in prison as non-threatening as possible. So he kind of pretended to befriend Charlie Manson and told him what a great guitar player he was. And if you're ever in Hollywood, come by, I'll get you into the music industry. Did Charlie really believe that?
So did you really believe Phil when he told you he could get you into movies with your guitar? I did. I wanted to believe it.
So around the same time, guess what else the prison encouraged the prisoners to study? Guess. I'll give you one guess.
NLP?
Almost. Scientology.
Oh.
Can you believe it? So he actually did 101, I think, of those sessions. I forget what they call them. Yeah. So can he talk about his experience with Scientology? I don't want to say anything about Scientology because guess what? They go after people. I never talk about it.
Yeah.
But this would be Charlie Manson, so.
Yeah. So can you tell us about your experience with the Scientology classes? What did you think about that? It puzzled the heck out of me how it could be legal to say you were a church and do those kinds of things to people. But I found it useful. Another tool to add to my toolbox. And I made use of it. Also made some good connections. It was valuable in that way.
I think a lot of people don't know this. It was news to me. I've probably read it before, but you forget over the years. He actually sent a few members of the family to England to work with Scientologists there, is what I read. Is that true?
Is it true you sent some of your members of your group to England to work with Scientology? He's saying no, it's not true.
That's not true?
He kept his people closer to him. He didn't want to get them too far away.
Oh, that's interesting. I wonder, were there Scientologists who peripherally got to know the family and then they went to London, to England?
So were there people who were peripheral to your group who then went to England and connected with Scientologists? Well, I suppose they could be. I don't know about them.
Yeah, he didn't have anything to do with it. So here he's, spending time in prison, and he gets to about 1967 and he's served his time. They're going to let him out. And he went, according to what I read, he went to the prison officials and begged them to let him stay. Is that true?
Astonishing if he did. So is it true that
he had nowhere to go?
That doesn't line up with his personality, though. So there's a story that you begged the prison to keep you in 1967 when you were supposed to get loose. Is that true? Did you really do that? No, a person would have to be crazy to do that.
Well, the authorities at the prison claimed that he asked to please let me stay because I'm institutionalized. You know, I've all been in, he was in institutions, prisons, reform schools, etc. More than anything else, like most of his life by that point. And he was in his, you know, how old was he? He was in his 20s, late 20s.
Maybe he was in a drug-addled state, an altered state of some sort, and did that. So let's ask that question.
Yeah.
So is it possible that you were in some altered state and you actually did this? No, no way. They're just creating mythology.
You would think they wouldn't need to create any stories. The reality is remarkable enough, you know.
It is, but you know, there are twisted people who want to insert themselves into situations.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like.
So he ended up in Berkeley, and he ended up crashing on people's sofas in Berkeley. And he went into the library of the university and met a young woman named Mary. Can't find it here. Hang on. I've got it written down. Well, I'll get to it. And he ended up living in her apartment with her. But he also met a guy that was his caseworker. And this guy was working out of a clinic, a free clinic at Haight-Ashbury. His name was Roger Smith. This is so weird, Deborah. It turns out this Roger Smith was working with money from the CIA and the National Institute of Health, running a secret study without the people knowing they were part of the study. So young people, all these young people would come into the clinic, and he was some sort of counselor, and he was giving them LSD and methamphetamines without their real understanding of what they were getting and why. And they were observing the behavioral effects on these young people on behalf of national intelligence.
Yeah.
So how much does he know about that?
So can you tell us about Roger Smith and what was going on with the drugs they were using on the children in the study? Do you know anything about that? Were you connected? Were you part of it? I was an observer. Throughout my life, I learned to watch, to listen, because that gives you power. Knowledge gives you power. So I knew what he was up to. I was keeping an eye on it. Found it really interesting.
Well, according to the study, he was one of the recipients of the drugs, and they kept a record of his behavior and said that he they'd never seen anybody have their personality change as quickly and as extremely as his did. In his professional career, they said, working as a psychologist with people on drugs, they'd never seen anything like it when he got drugged. So does he maintain he wasn't drugged?
So are you saying that you were not drugged if you were a part of it? Not saying that, no. Somebody's going to hand out some good stuff. I'm going to participate. But I was keeping an eye on things. I wasn't as affected as they like to think that I was. Now, this is him being braggadocious.
Deborah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. But immediately after I asked this question, the screen went blank. And little things started spinning, and I didn't hear a word you say. Somebody's not very pleased with that question.
Apparently. No, he was being braggadocious, and he was saying, of course, you know, if they're giving out the good stuff, I'm going to take some of it. But he's trying to intimate that he wasn't under the influence like the other people were, that he was learning and studying. Mm-hmm. But it's the energy it's just the braggadocious thing that's coming through.
Well, I think we got our verification when everything went blank and went. That was my answer. So he was nurturing this belief that he could control people. He had all these tools, that he gathered in prison, that young women were drawn to the whole guitar shtick, and that he could put them to work out in the field for to support him and apply his hypnosis / Scientology / Dale Carnegie stuff. And he had this weird philosophy of the Beatles, the Bible, Scientology, Dale Carnegie, moral relativity. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, he's calling it a crazy stew. It's like
you think?
Threw all the stuff into the cauldron and stirred it up, and that was the crazy stew. But he was consciously adding new tools all the time. He was always listening and learning. So
what did he hope to achieve with all this?
What did you hope to achieve by learning all of these different things and experimenting with them? I wanted to be God, man. He thought he was superhuman. He thought he had some kind of superpowers, and he could skate and do all these things that should have, had a negative influence. It just,
Does he have the insight now to recognize that this is the grandiosity of psychopathy?
So, do you have the insight now to see that that was part of your psychopathy? I suppose it was. That's a good point you make there, Helen. I hadn't really thought about it.
Let me ask a question a little bit off my list here. This is something that I find absolutely fascinating. Maybe he can, help us understand. We've talked to a lot of people through the Akashic records, and we both have been really kind of shocked by some people who in spirit form don't seem to have made a lot of progress or gained a lot of insight. And what would he say about that? Like, after you die, do most people realize, okay, now I have to be serious about this spiritual evolutionary stuff? Or do people tend to continue to be hampered by things like mental illness and psychopathy, which is a personality disorder? I would think a personality disorder would be attached to the physical, but maybe it's purely karmic. Does he have any insight into that?
Great question. So can you tell us about that, Charlie? Insights into that whole list that Helen just gave you.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
It's hard to summarize.
Yeah. Well, you have to understand, there are some souls that get fragmented. And when they cross over, it's not like it's all sunshine, lollipops, and rainbows. They've got to fix that soul. And that takes time, effort, and not all of it can be handled in between lifetimes. Sometimes they've got to incarnate, work on the karma,
right,
and then try again, do a reset. So it depends on the depth of the psychopathy and the fragmentation. There are some who are so fragmented that they're not getting a chance at incarnating again for millennia. So you have to understand it's all stages. Others who get it, they recognize where they went off the path, and they're ready to go and make amends, clear up that karma. So it really is a large span.
What does he do? What does he have to do to get that to bring things back together as a whole, to make himself whole again spiritually? What does he actually have to do?
So can you tell us, what is it that you have to do to bring yourself back into wholeness again before you incarnate? There's a lot of making amends, and that happens by helping out, doing good deeds on this side, connecting and helping people who I harmed on the other side without them knowing, of course. So there's some of that. There's also what you might call soul school, where we go to learn about how we got so screwed up and how we can avoid doing it again in the future. And then there is a lot of contemplative time, reviewing the mistakes, getting to the bottom. You might call it like psychoanalysis, digging deep, finding out what was wrong, why we made the choices we made, learning from that. And then there's some role playing testing before we ever get a chance to do it again live.
So between lives, like where he is right now, I'm assuming, do you find out about the karmic debt you brought into your most recent life that affected your behavior? Do you face that karmic debt and try to understand to apply that knowledge next time?
So could you tell us, when you return and you do your life review, does that include looking at karmic debt that you brought into your most recent life and how it impacted you? Oh yeah, it's all part of the package of the life review. We go through all of the things that we set out for ourselves that we wanted to accomplish in that lifetime. And then we look at where we screwed up, where we got things right. We sort it all out, and we put all that together in a program, you might say, for us to work on in soul school as we try to clear those things up and move into a lighter energy so that we can prepare to have another lifetime one day.
Okay, so I think it's probably a common misconception that if you kill somebody in this incarnation, in your next incarnation, somebody's going to kill you. You know, like a tit for a tat, that kind of making amends. That's how karma works. And it's not how karma works, because you've got like a wealth of past lives, and it could be any number of issues that you might decide to work on in your new incarnation. However, does he have any insight now into specifically what happened to him in a past life that he was dealing with in his life as Charlie Manson?
So can you tell us, is there karma from past lives that affected you in your life as Charlie that you are now aware of and working on clearing up? Oh, of course. There were some really dark lives before the life of Charlie. And
like what? I mean, I'm actually asking.
oh, okay.
What just to show people how it gets translated from one life to another.
Okay. So can you give us more details about that? What kind of darkness in these previous lives that led you to being Charlie? It's like he has this thumbprint on his energy, this big black thumbprint that's like coal dust or something, that was a remnant from a past life. And that cast a shadow over everything. But he's also saying, you know, I chose to be born to my mother so that I could work on those dark things and clear them up. But I was a little overconfident, and I bit off more than I could chew. Yeah. And it took me down more dark paths. So even though my intention was to do better in the life as Charlie, I set myself up for failure. I can see that now. I was too grandiose. And that's something I'll be working on next time. Breaking things down, chunking it up, not trying to do it all at once, because it's pretty deep. It's going to take multiple lifetimes to clear up.
Does he know what his karmic relationship was with Sharon Tate?
Did you have a karmic relationship with Sharon Tate? Well, I didn't, but I sure do now.
Okay. I guess that says it pretty clearly. So I have the name finally of the young woman with whom he lived. She was a librarian at the university. Her name was Mary Brenner, and she had a baby by him, as did his first wife, as did his second wife. So he had several sons. with whom he really, I don't think, had much of a relationship. But here he is back in the Bay Area and collecting young women from all over Haight-Ashbury. And in 1967, in the summer, Haight-Ashbury was like the center of the universe. I don't know. You're too young to remember, huh?
Yeah, I was in grade school then.
Oh, yeah. Well, I remember. It was the summer of love. I remember there was an article in, I don't know if it was Life magazine or Time magazine, and it was about the hippies in Haight-Ashbury and in California in general. And they were all down at a river, swimming around in the river naked. And I can remember just being, oh my, I was, I don't know, 13 or 14. I was absolutely fascinated by this sort of subculture. I didn't know very much about it. So did he interacted with the Diggers? Can he describe that a little bit? The Diggers they took the name from an old religious organization from like the time of the Puritans, the Shakers, the Quakers, the Diggers. They were all a form of early Christianity in the United States. But I don't know if he worked with them or he benefited from them, but they made it their business to provide food every day for all these poor wandering souls, these children, very young teenagers, many of them that were just rootless, completely rudderless, roaming around Haight-Ashbury, San Francisco. They had tuberculosis, they had sexually transmitted infections, they were getting pregnant and not knowing what to do about it. And there was a lot of person-on-person crime. It was a scene. It was terrible. Can you describe the work that the Diggers did?
So tell us about the Diggers and your relationship with them. They were interesting guys. I appreciated that they were trying to help the young because there were a lot of messed up kids out there. I borrowed some of their mannerisms and some of their words because it became very useful when I was bringing new people into my group, conditioning them.
That's actually exactly what it said in the research that I did, that he borrowed from them their techniques of luring in. I mean, he was all about, he was like some kind of a cobra luring people in. He told these girls, I mean, he had like 35 girls living in this apartment, this little tiny apartment, and wandering the streets of Haight-Ashbury. I mean, it defies imagination because most of them were very young teenagers. But he told them that he was the reincarnation of Jesus. Would you like to talk about that?
Okay. There's that grandiosity, right? Superman. Yeah. So, tell us about the time when you claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus. Well, I believed it. I convinced myself that that's really who I was and that I was on this spiritual mission, saving souls.
Okay. He told them he was the reincarnation of Jesus and the establishment of the man. That was the Romans. They believed it. So he ended up going down to LA to Venice. Venice?
I know of it.
Yeah. It was built in, I want to say, the very early turn of the century, 1900s to the 1920s. And it was this little neighborhood. At the time, there was not much else there. And they built it to look like Venice in Italy. And really a cute area now. It's riddled with gang violence, but and it cost a fortune to rent someplace there. They had little canals and little wooden bridges and cute little cottages. And anyway, he went down there, and while he was down there, he met Squeaky Lynette Fromm. I'll tell you later why he called her Squeaky, but can he describe her for us?
Can you describe Annette Fromm for us? She was cool. I liked her. She had a certain sass about her. She was lost like the others, but she didn't know that. I could see it. She had a mask that she wore for the world, trying to present herself as together and knowing who she was and what she wanted to be in life. But inside, she had the same torments, same insecurities, and she was really easy to play. But I did appreciate her. She was smart.
He told her, I am the gardener because I'm taking care of the flower children.
That's pretty slick.
Pretty good line. Cracked me up. Anyway, he had all these homeless, lost, disaffected, often really ill kids, and many of them, as often, with homeless kids, they're escaping mistreatment at home. It's really sad. He filled a void. He was very clever. He met Patricia Krenwinkel then. So he had this little harem going on. She gave him her father's gas card. So that was why. So is that why he kept her in the group, because of the money?
So Patricia, you kept her in the group because of the money from her father? Or was there some other reason? Well, I found her useful. The money didn't hurt. That she had other attributes that she brought.
Well, then he met Susan Atkins, and Susan Atkins, they called her Sexy Sadie, and I think she was the one who was the stripper. Is that right?
Susan Atkins, was she a stripper? Well, I wouldn't call her that, but people did.
Okay, adult dancer. My daughter is a dancer, and I always have to explain, not on tables, not on poles. She wears clothes because there's more than one kind of dancing.
Yeah.
He met this girl named Ruth Ann Morehouse, who was 14, and met her parents. Her parents belonged to some sort of cult, and he met her, and he liked, like somebody else we could name, really liked the underage ones, right?
Yeah.
And her parents said, sure, go ahead. She can go with you. Parents of the year.
He just said they were more malleable. That's why he liked the younger ones.
Yeah, well, that's what he's saying. There's more to it than that. Let's see here. So then they met Dennis Wilson. You know that story. Very interesting story. Two of the girls.
He was a beach boy, but I don't know about him meeting Charles Manson.
Oh my God. It's what led to the murders.
Oh, I didn't.
So he was the only beach boy who knew how to surf. He was a surfer. And he really helped to maintain the image. And they were incredibly wealthy. And he had this kind of cool, weird house, kind of like a fake log cabin in Laurel Canyon. Laurel Canyon is where all the music scene gravitated. It was called a weird scene. Joni Mitchell, the Eagles, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young, all of them, just everybody, Bob Dylan, they were all there. And so Dennis Wilson was driving on the Coast Highway. It's the road that runs along the beach under Pacific Palisades one day, and headed to Laurel Canyon, I think, and saw two girls hitchhiking, and they were cute, and he picked them up, and they were, I forget who they were, two of the Manson girls, but I forget exactly which two. Just two hippie chicks. Anyway, he gave them a ride. He took them back to his house. And I guess they must have had a phone, and they were able to call Charlie Manson. And they said, we're at this guy's house, and wow, it's really fancy. He's obviously got a lot of money. And he says, well, who is it? And then they said, Dennis Wilson. And he said, oh my God, I'm on my way. And he showed up with all these girls and babies and weirdos in tow. And they pretty much just took over Dennis Wilson's house. And he tended to be passive and very easily placated with drugs and sex. And so he had all these nubile young girls running around willing to do anything, and an endless supply of drugs. So he was a very generous person. He was actually a really nice person. And so he felt sorry for them that he let them stay. They took over his house. They sold his gold records. They sold everything that wasn't nailed down. They went through like a bunch of termites or army ants or something. And they were there for quite a while, and he couldn't get rid of them. And he finally was getting nervous because they were getting more and more kind of weird, and Charlie was getting more violent, and Charlie was putting all this pressure on him to record him in the music industry. And so he moved out and rented an apartment and didn't tell them that the lease on the house was coming due. And so one day the landlords showed up at the house, you're all being evicted. And they said, well, yeah, better talk to Dennis. It's his house. And he said, oh, Dennis is gone. Dennis moved out. They didn't even know, they just took over completely. So long story short, they ended up in the Spawn movie ranch, but they continued the friendship with Dennis Wilson. So can he talk about his relationship with Dennis Wilson?
Okay, so tell us about your relationship with Dennis Wilson. It had a lot of promise, but it fizzled out. It was a great disappointment to me. Yes, Helen's right. He was easy to manipulate. But there was a thread in him that I couldn't get past. That sense of survival that caused him to move out and save himself. So in the end, he proved to be less helpful than I had hoped that he would be. It was one of my great disappointments.
One of the girls that got picked up that day hitchhiking was Patricia Krenwinkel. And the other was a girl named Ella Jo Bailey. Not as familiar a name, but she was a member of the family. So they hung out. They finally got kicked out. But Wilson kept visiting them. They moved to the Spawn movie ranch. So now this is a place kind of by Rancho Cucamonga, out in the hills up above, kind of between the valley and LA, in the hills. And it had been used in the silent film era and later as kind of a Western movie set. They had false fronts, the board walks, the board sidewalks, and they had horses, and people would come for the day and rent the horses to ride around, and it was all hot and dirty and gross. But they moved in. They sort of moved into these fake buildings. There was an old guy named Spawn who this property had been his, and he was, very old and very decrepit. So Charlie got Lynette Fromm to be his private duty nurse and more. And the reason he called her Squeaky was because of the sounds that she made. You know what I'm getting at.
Yes.
So they manipulated this old guy. They were in the process of trying to convince him to sign over the title to all the land and everything on it and all the horses to them. But then there was this weird event that happened where, first of all, the murders that he sent them all out on. But the police came and did a big raid on the ranch because they've been stealing cars. And somebody found out, they had undercover cops, and they found out all these stolen cars and car parts were on this ranch, and that these people were doing some sort of criminal ring. And so they arrested a bunch of them. Charlie almost got away. Well, almost didn't get found. He was hiding in the cabinet under the kitchen sink because he was a little guy, but they got him out and he got arrested, and they all got arrested, and it was just a complete mess. But before that happened, they had frequent visitors that would come for the girls and for the drugs. Dennis Wilson, Phil Kaufman, the music producer he had met in prison, and the very famous Terry Melcher. Now, Terry Melcher was Doris Day's son. And maybe Charlie can tell us, what did he see in Terry Melcher?
Yeah, tell us about Terry Melcher. What was that relationship like? I was a big fan of his mother, so I got a real kick out of bringing her son in, corrupting the good little boy. What else? What kind of relationship? Oh, he had money, so he was useful when we needed funds. He was one of the people that we could tap for funds, and we gave him a lot of fun in return, which he was most grateful for. So you might say one hand washed the other.
And a lot of them were happy to use the Manson family for the girls and the drugs, and they would tell them anything. Like Phil Kaufman led him on in prison, that he had a great career ahead of him and that Phil would get him a record deal. Terry Melcher and Dennis Wilson were kind of similar. They actually took him into the Beach Boys' private Hollywood music studio where they recorded. They had their own recording place and recorded a couple of songs. You can hear them. I think they're on YouTube. But they were like, he's okay. He's no great thing. And I think Terry Melcher just told him, keep working on it, guy. Keep working on it. When they left Dennis Wilson's house, because this is all kind of going on simultaneously. They were going back and forth from his house to the ranch. Wilson, Melcher, Kaufman were going back and forth between Dennis Wilson's house and the ranch for the purposes of using what was on offer. And when they finally left Wilson's house, Charles was really angry, and he left a note. And with the note, he left a bullet on the note. Would he like to talk about that?
Yeah, tell us about the note that you left with the bullet. I was giving them a reality check. They thought they could just walk out on me and there'd be no consequences. They underestimated my power and my reach. I wanted them to have some sleepless nights and think about it. Planting seeds, you might say, so that I could continue to use them in the future.
Did he know what they really thought about him?
Did you know what they really thought about you? I didn't care what they really thought about me. All that mattered is what I could get them to do for me.
Well, I'm going to, respectfully disagree, because the assumption, maybe this is wrong, but the assumption is that you sent members of your family out on a hunting expedition to take revenge on Terry Melcher. Is that not true?
So did you send members of the family to take revenge on Terry Melcher? Did that little pipsqueak tell you that I guess the mind games I played with him worked? They might have insinuated it, but there was no plan to take him out. He was too useful alive.
How come they chose that house?
Which house?
Where Sailor Drive, where the Sharon Tate murders happened. That was Terry Melcher's house. He lived there, and Charlie Manson knew it. He lived there with his off and on again girlfriend, Candace Bergen. And Terry had moved out, and the question still exists. Did Charles Manson know that Terry didn't live there anymore, or did he not care?
So the house where the murders happened, did you know that was Terry Melcher's house? Is that why it was chosen? I might have known. I don't remember. We picked the house because it fit the profile that we were looking for. There were rich people inside. and we knew we could score big. There was word on the pipeline that there would be drugs there, and we're getting low. So we were looking to replenish our stash, and we were looking to mess up some women while we made the men watch and tortured them. We were looking for a good time, you might say.
Well, when he sent them out, he wasn't there. When he sent them out.
Say that again. My hearing aid cut out for a sec.
Oh, he wasn't there. At least that's the story. He wasn't there. He sent them out like emissaries to do his bidding. And he said, make it look bad, make it look terrible. And he told them to write pig on the walls because it was part of his whole delusion. He had this whole story that he had concocted, that there was going to be a race war. And they were in the process of creating underground bunkers in the Mojave Desert to escape the race war. And then they were going to, and he called that helter skelter. And they were going to come out after the race war, and they would lead the world because they'd be the last white people left. How much of that did he really believe?
So did you really believe those stories that you told the family about the race war? You got to remember, I was pretty out of my head at that time. Between the drugs and getting high on my own stories, it's like he got lost in the fantasy that he had woven about his life and his world. He lost the sense of reality. He was living in a fantasy world.
Well, they were endlessly doing LSD, and he was careful to be cautious about what he took, but he intentionally was drugging all the people around him, telling them it was a sacrament, giving them more than they thought they were getting. Rumor has it that he met Jay Sebring. He was one of the victims that night, that he had met him previously at a party in Topanga Canyon. Is that true?
Did you meet J.C. Brink previously?
No, Jay Sebring. Sebring.
Sebring?
Sebring.
Sebring, okay.
Was his last name, yeah.
Okay, so did you meet Sebring before the night of the murders? That's all a blur. I might have. I don't know.
So I know what they say to answer this question, but I want to hear what he had to say. What was his intention sending them out to kill people? What did he hope to achieve?
So what was the reason that you sent the family out to kill people? What was the end goal there? It was a multi-layered pie. On the one hand, I wanted to assert my power with the family. I wanted them to stretch and do what I asked. So it was a test to see how far they would really go. And then the other layer was that I wanted to make people pay. And it didn't matter who the people were. I wanted to make people pay for the hell that my life had been. Because here they are living high on the hog. And I'm having to live hand to mouth, struggling all my life, this feral child. It just wasn't fair. I wanted to even the odds. And at that point, I was pretty out of it in my own head, feeling like I was God and I had the power over life and death. So I was just exerting that power.
So are you trying to maintain that they chose that house because it looked like rich people lived there? It had nothing to do with the fact that you knew it was Terry Melcher's house?
So are you saying that it was just a coincidence that it was Terry Melcher's house for the murders? Well, I believe in fate. But it wasn't a deliberate attempt on Terry Melcher's house. It was a confluence of coincidences and synchronicities, you might say. Yeah, I'd have to say it was fate.
You'll have to forgive me if I don't believe that. We're talking Los Angeles. How many million of people live in Los Angeles? And you just coincidentally hit Melcher's house. I just defies belief. So I don't want to really go into the murders. I made videos about this, and I tried really hard to not get too tied up in the gory details. Yeah. There doesn't seem to be any point to dwell on that too much. Eventually they did the raid because of the stealing of the cars, and one of the young women was arrested and was kind of moldering away in the LA County jail because she didn't have the money to pay to get out. And she decided to trade what she knew for, a more lenient set of charges and getting out. And she blew the whistle on them. That's how they got caught. I wonder if they'd ever would have gotten caught. And here's the other thing. The LaBiancas was the couple that were murdered the next day. Now, once again, we're talking about random place in Los Angeles, millions of people. They lived in the house next door to a house he'd been to for a party. I think it was in Los Feliz, which is a pretty ritzy neighborhood. Would you say that was just a coincidence too?
So was it a coincidence about the second house that was chosen for the murders? I'm telling you, it's fate, man. We weren't going out looking for anybody in particular. We were looking for an ideal, a type. That's all we were going after.
Okay, I'm looking here at this list. I mean, they actually killed or are considered the likely killers of a lot of people. I've got a list here of over 15 people over a period of time. How many would he like to take credit for? How many people did he kill?
Yeah, I didn't know there were more than just the one house. So news to me.
No.
Okay.
No, and they weren't splashy like that. They weren't in the headlines, and one guy here, one guy there, one young girl disappeared, and maybe buried in the desert, maybe disappeared completely, maybe their body was found and they put two and two together and thought it was them, and maybe they didn't. We don't know. How many would he take credit for?
So, Charlie, honestly, can you tell us how many murders you were personally responsible for? You actually committed yourself. Telling you none, man. I kept my hands clean. I had people for that.
Well, let me make an analogy here. Mafia bosses, they don't keep a record of anything written down, and they delegate their dirty work.
Yeah.
Somebody else that we could name that we won't because we don't want to have any problems, who's in a very high position of authority, doesn't send emails, doesn't put anything to paper, and delegates. It's a trait very common in psychopathy. They were arrested, they were charged, they were convicted, they were incarcerated, and eventually he died in prison. There's a really interesting video analysis by another doctor, another psychologist who's a behavioral expert, and he talked about his behavior and what you could tell during these interviews from his behavior. And so I would ask this question: does Charlie think that he ever really developed any insight after the fact, after he was arrested, or did he just continue to manipulate his way through his prison sentence until he died?
So tell us, did you ever have a moment where you got clarity about what you had done? Or did you stay in denial until death? It's hard to answer that question because I was in a haze so much of the time.
He was, pardon me, he was in a what?
He was in a haze.
Oh, a haze.
Haze. Okay. So he's like trying to show me the pictures, and they're all blurry, out of focus. You can't make out faces. And that's how he saw everything. He was just in that otherworldliness. So it's not even like he can sit back and say, oh yeah, I remember I did this and I did that. It just all runs together. It's a big blur.
What would he say he learned in that lifetime?
So tell us what you learned in that lifetime. I learned I better do a better job of picking my mother the next time. Don't be so ambitious about the goals. Take it down a few notches. Try an easier life so that I have a chance at making amends before moving on to something more challenging. I bit off way more than I could chew. That's the truth.
Anything about personal responsibility for choices, free will choices?
So what about responsibility for the choices you made? I'll admit it, I made a lot of bad ones. I made a big mess of things. And I'm paying for it, believe me.
Well, is there anything you want to ask us before we end this?
Is there anything that you would like to ask us? I don't think so. I think you covered pretty much everything. And there's just not that much that I want to talk about anymore. I'm moving on, not dwelling on the past.
Okay, well, I appreciate it. Thanks, for talking with us.
Thank you, Charlie. We appreciate it. Does that feel dissatisfying to you?
How much of that was BS? I'll tell you what, I feel like that Dale Carnegie course served him well. So, oh, he had nothing to do with it, and he doesn't, it's all a haze. That's what they always say. I just blacked out. I don't remember, officer. Okay, so we have a few questions for Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski.
Okay.
Just include it in this. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate.
Keep it together? Yeah. Okay, so Sharon Tate. First of all, I think everybody feels a great deal of kind of horror and sadness at what happened to you. That was just a terrible thing that traumatized the whole culture, don't you think? I mean, well, you were young. It was bad. It was terrible. So, my sympathies about that. My big question would be your relationship with Roman Polanski. I did some, no offense, I did some tarot cards on it. And I got the sense that you and Roman were not exactly 100% in agreement about this child, that he was not thrilled at the notion of parenthood. And you were very much thrilled about it. And you wanted to kind of back out a little bit from acting and focus on this new baby that was coming. Is that true?
So what do you have to say about that, Sharon? Is it true? Roman was not thrilled. You're correct about that. But I always felt that once the baby was born, he would come around. And I was consumed with pregnancy hormones. So I was all about nesting. The
That's
marriage.
exactly the feeling I got. Yeah. That's what your tarot card said. were,
Huh.
were you seriously considering kind of a sabbatical from acting while the baby was a baby?
So were you considering taking time off to be the mother? I was. I don't know if I would have actually followed through once the baby was born and I got past those hormones because they were powerful. But yes,
Oh yeah.
at
Tell
the
me
moment,
about it.
at the moment, she's saying that was her plan.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure. There's a story, and I don't know whether it's true or not, but you had actually moved into the house. Roman was gone wherever it was he was working. And this scruffy guy showed up looking to talk to Terry Melcher. And the owner of the property, like the landlord, just happened to be there and ran interference, for her. But this scruffy guy saw her and she saw him. And she was creeped out by him. That's the story. Is that true? I mean, we're talking Charlie Manson. Is that true?
Yeah. So is it true that there was a scruffy man hanging around that freaked you out? I'm not getting a yes or a no. It's just kind of a confusion. It's like it's blanked out for her.
It was one of these things where he showed up unexpectedly in the middle of the day and was encountered by the landlord who just happened to be in the yard. And there was a give and take between Manson and the landlord. Manson wanted Melcher. The landlord said he doesn't live here anymore. Go down to the other house, like the guest house, to talk to whoever's taking care of the property. Maybe he's got the phone number or whatever. While that conversation was going on, Sharon Tate happened to come around the corner of the house. They made eye contact. She thought, ew. And she turned around and went back in the house. So it was just a momentary thing, but it did register because she mentioned it later. Who was that scruffy looking guy? Yeah. She doesn't remember, huh?
I'll ask her again. So you came around the corner of the house and you saw the scruffy guy and you were creeped out and you turned around and went back. That's the story that's been told. Is that a true story? She's saying it was so long ago and she's really moved past all of that. So she doesn't remember.
Right. Now that she's crossed over, does she have a sense of whether or not there was some kind of karmic work between her and somebody in the Manson family, if not Charles Manson, some of the perpetrators?
So can you tell us, was there some kind of a karmic connection between you and either Manson or somebody in the family that led to your demise? No, just the wrong place at the wrong time. But of course, in truth, it was one of the exit points for my soul. So I chose to go at that time. I could have stayed, but I chose to go. So all of that just facilitated it. And she's saying, ironically, it turned me into a legend.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Because that's what she was going for in Hollywood. I know. It's weird. Huh? So when she crossed over, this is my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. Oftentimes when you go through a trauma like that, your soul leaves your body. You don't feel the pain. You might observe what's going on, but you don't participate. Your body goes through it, but your soul doesn't participate. It's a kind of a way to protect you from the trauma, the horror of it. So once she passed over, did she have clarity right away about what had happened and why it had happened and where she was going next?
So after the traumatic death and you crossed over, did you have clarity about what had happened, why it had happened, and the purposefulness of it all? It took me a little while to recover because it was a shock. It was so brutal and sudden, unexpected.
Unexpected. That's the word I had. You just took it right out of my
Just,
head. Yeah.
and she's showing me like she was just ripped out of her body rapidly.
Yeah.
So like you're not even time to catch your breath. You're just whoosh, gone.
Yeah.
So it took me a while to come to grips with that and make sense of it all.
Mhm.
But then when I did my life review, I could see that that was one of my chosen exits.
Mhm.
And honestly, it might have had something to do with things not going as well with Roman as I had hoped. And so it was a convenient time to step out while I was on top. I was doing well. I'd accomplished a lot that I wanted to in that lifetime, so I was at peace about it.
Was the baby's soul with you after you passed over?
Were you connected with the baby's soul after you crossed over? Yes, of course. We had time to spend together, and we also reviewed why the baby chose me as its mother.
Yeah, I'm wondering about that. That was so interesting to me. Why? Because that was not even a, not even a life, really. I mean,
Yeah.
she was 9 months pregnant. I mean, that baby was due any minute. So, did the baby actually draw a breath, or did it die in utero?
Did the baby ever draw a breath? No.
Okay. And I'm not asking to be ghoulish. I'm asking because there's a belief in the Jewish faith that your soul doesn't enter your body till you take your first breath. So I'm just sort of curious about how that worked.
But there was a soul that was waiting to go into the body.
Yes, yes.
So she connected with that soul on the other side.
Yeah, that makes sense. Can we ask her about Roman? Like what the hell's going on with him? Was he okay? So let's back up a little bit because there's background to this, and you can hear it in the video that I made about it. But very briefly, he was born in Poland during the Nazi occupation and ended up living in the sewer or something. I mean, he was a street child, completely abandoned to his fate during all this violence that was going on, and had to very much. Now it just occurred to me, very much like Charlie Manson. And his mother died when she was pregnant. She went to the gas chamber when she was pregnant.
Wow.
And that trauma, it had to have informed his life. So I'm curious, what kind of insight does she have into his admittedly reprehensible behavior now? I mean, the reason he's not in the United States is because when he comes into the border, they're going to arrest him. So he's hanging out in Europe. What can she say about that?
So can you tell us about the situation with Roman growing up the way he did and how it impacted him as an adult and in your relationship? It was certainly a factor. He was not the man that I thought he was. He was closed off. It's like he had nightmares. And he couldn't talk about it. He was not somebody who talked about it. So he just walled that part of himself away from her so she could never get into that side. And she said she did not know about the predilection, shall we say.
Yeah.
And so that's why she's feeling like everything worked out for the best, because eventually that would have come out and it would have been devastating if they had been together.
Here's a weird question. Did she meet his mother on the other side?
Did you meet his mother on the other side? No, there was no reason to.
Well, I guess she didn't need insight into their marriage at that point.
No.
I don't know. I don't really have any other questions about him or her. I feel like it was just this terrible tragedy, but at the same time, like she said, it was time for her to go. I feel very sorry for her family. Does she have any like message or comment to make? Her sister and her mother just devastated. It was heartbreaking to see them and to hear them. They're still, her sister is still, you know, really devastated by it.
Yeah. So any message that you would like to send to your mother, your sister, or other family members? I'm at peace. It was long ago. I've moved on. And honestly, if they thought they were traumatized by that, imagine what they would have felt like if I had still been married to him when all of these other things happened in the news.
Yeah. Be like being married to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank her. I'm very sorry about what happened. I think it's unfortunate that she didn't get time with her baby just because, you know, but it was the right time for her and it worked out.
She doesn't have any of that energy or that regret. Her focus is on, it was a successful life because I was a legend. People still talk about me. You're still talking about me.
Remarkable.
I made an imprint, and that's what souls come here to do, to change the world in some way. Not the way she expected it.
How does she feel, what kind of change does she think this brought about?
What her murder, you mean? The change that it brought about?
What kind of message or lesson?
Yeah, it showed a spotlight on certain aspects of culture that people just weren't aware of. It was a more innocent time, and it peeled it back to show this ugliness and of course the psychopathy that they're still untangling. So it was a catalyst, is what she's saying, to opening that door, even though we're still doing it, you know, it's still unwinding.
So before we go, she might not be able to answer this, but we just talked to Charlie Manson. So does she ever get the opportunity to at least observe him? I mean, he is completely deluded still. Does she have anything to say about that?
Okay. So do you have anything you'd like to share with us about Manson himself? No, honestly, I don't think about him. He's not a part of my reality.
Well, that's too bad because I would love to get it from maybe a sane person. What was going on with him? Yeah. But no, I understand. I completely understand. Well, thank you.
Yeah, she's saying that's a human thing to hold on to those connections.
Well, here we are.
Yeah, but on the other side, it's like over and done, moving on.
Yeah, yeah. I always say when I die, there are some things I absolutely want to know. I want to know who killed Kennedy. I want to know what happened to the Lindbergh baby. I mean, I've got this list of mysteries that I want solved. And the reality is that you're not going to care at all. You're not going to care. Yeah, yeah.
Those things are not important once you cross over.
Darn it. Well, tell her I said thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate it. She says you're welcome.
I don't really have a question for Roman Polanski, and besides, he's still alive, and
yeah,
icky. Yeah, we know, and we know what he's been up to. I think his background, it doesn't forgive anything, but I think it might explain some of it.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine you having to go live on the street and find a way to survive as a child after being ripped away from your mother who was pregnant and you know she's been murdered. I mean, it's just mind-boggling.
But you know, there were many people who went through horrific experiences like that and they didn't turn to the dark side.
That's right. It's our choice. Well, I think that's that for the Manson family. Case closed.
Okay.
Thank you,
job.
Deborah. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
And we're going to move on to somebody else now. So
okay.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. I know people really enjoy these sessions that we do. Very interesting. I find it very interesting. So I'm thrilled to know that other people do too. And we owe you a lot, Deborah. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Song before everybody.
Bye.